Great. And I will share my screen. All right, so hopefully everyone can see my screen now. So thank you again for joining us for this BERDO Review Board meeting. As I mentioned, my name is Diana. We currently do not have a chair, an appointed chair for our group. So I'm going to kick us off by going through a vote for acting chair. Does anyone want to make a nomination for acting chair today? Great. I think I heard Board Member Lattimore nominate Board Member Lee. Do I have a second?
Second.
Great. And then we'll do a vote, roll call style. How do you vote, Board Member Boyd?
In favor.
Board Member Ellis?
Aye.
Board Member Jacobs?
In favor.
Board Member Lattimore?
Aye.
Board Member Matsueda?
In favor.
Board Member Nelson?
Favor.
And Board Member Palmer Dunning?
Favor.
Awesome. I will now hand it over to Board Member Matsueda.
Great, awesome. Good afternoon, everyone. Good to see you. Thanks for joining us. So I'm going to go ahead and call this public hearing to order at 4:35 p.m. In accordance with the Building Emissions Reduction and Disclosure Ordinance regulations adopted pursuant to the Building Emissions Reduction and Disclosure Ordinance. Boston City Code Ordinances Section 7-2.2. The BERDO Review Board will hold a virtual public hearing at 4:30 on September 11th to review the following topics in regards to the reduction of greenhouse gases from building energy production and consumption so as to promote the public health and welfare of the Boston residents. In accordance with the Commonwealth of Massachusetts Executive Order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, we're going to conduct this public meeting online. To ensure public access to the deliberations of the BERDO Review Board, the public may access this call through telephone and video conferencing. Members of the public will have an opportunity to ask questions and provide public comment on regulation discussions. And so to do so, you can please raise your hand or type in the chat in the application via the Zoom meeting platform. And if you're calling in and you can't use that platform, raise your hand by pressing *9. Send your questions also to staff via email at berdoreviewboard@boston.gov. So for the record, I am Lee Matsueda, acting chair of the board. I'll now conduct a roll call of the board members. Board members, just please say your name in the order that they appear on the slide.
Board Member Rashida Boyd.
Board Member Stephen Ellis.
Board Member Lavette Jacobs.
Gail Lattimore.
Board member Lee Matsueda.
Jack Nelson. Hi, Palmer Dunning.
Great. And now let's have the staff introduce themselves, please.
Diana Vasquez with the Environment Department.
Aiden Callan, Environment Department.
Claudia Diaz Martinez, Environment Department.
Aladdin Joroff, Environment Department.
Great. All right, thank you. And so I think as you can see on the slides here, this is our agenda for today's meeting. We're going to start with the approval of meeting minutes. The Environment Department will then provide an update on BERDO reporting and implementation. The Environment Department will also provide an overview and key takeaways from recent working sessions in August on hardship and the fund. And then we will wrap up with some administrative updates and adjourn. So let's go to our first item, approval of the minutes. And, last meeting, I know there was a request, sounds like, to provide more detailed transcriptions in the minutes for August 7th meeting. And then we also have meeting minutes for the August 21st meeting. I think we're going to do them separately because people may or may not have been in both meetings. So for the August 7th meeting. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor, say aye or raise your hand. Aye.
Favor.
Any board members abstain? Any board members oppose? Okay, the ayes have it. We have approved the updated detailed notes from the 7th. Thanks for doing that. I know that's a little extra work. We also have the meeting minutes from the board meeting on August 21st. Is there a motion to approve these minutes?
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Any board members abstain? I'm going to
Aye.
abstain. I was not at that meeting.
Yeah, and me as well, Lee. I was on vacation.
And any board members oppose? Oh,
I don't think I was at
Sheila?
that meeting either. I wasn't at the last meeting.
I think that's right. Okay, any opposed? Did we have a quorum for that? Are we good? We have a quorum to vote, so we're good, right? Okay.
Yeah.
Excellent. So I think we have approved meeting minutes for the 7th and the 21st of August, which is great. So we can move on to our second item on the agenda. We're going to hear an update here on the regarding BERDO reporting and implementation following the August 15th reporting deadline. So I think I'm passing it to you, Aidan. Is that right?
Yeah, thanks, Lee. All right, you can go to the next slide. All right, so just want to kick things off by running through our our compliance status numbers as of last week, discuss the context around those numbers, and outline our plan for increasing BERDO compliance and engagement. But just as a sort of reminder, reporting 2022 data was initially due on May 15th with a few deadline extensions, the last of which was August 15th. We're still continuing to work with non-compliant buildings to kind of get them across the finish line, as I'll expand upon in a few slides. And do want to note that the 2022 data disclosure is planned for next month in October. So that will be an automated disclosure data set and map. I had gone through maybe 2 months ago the disclosure map where I showed, clicked on different shapes, different parcels within the city, and showed the results there. That was a static map. We are close to automating that so that as soon as somebody submits their data, the map is automated to fully reflect that. So that automated map will be for both 2021 data and 2022 data. You can go to the next slide. Okay, so here's a look at our recent compliance numbers compared to mid-July and late June. So right now we have about 46% of buildings that have submitted to the BERDO team. And I noted I kept the number of buildings that had requested extensions to show those non-compliant buildings that are at least actively engaged within the reporting process this year. But as we discussed on our last review board meeting, this needs more context, particularly around looking at compliance rate by square footage, as opposed to by building, as looking at square footage compliance might more accurately align with the emissions that are in compliance with BERDO. So to provide a bit more context on this, we'll go to the next slide. So we were able to run those numbers as opposed to the 46% by building. Compliance by square footage stands at 63%. So I do want to note that there is that pretty large discrepancy because the non-compliant buildings tend to be smaller and newer to the BERDO reporting process. There are buildings that are, just receiving notices for the first time over the last year, having to gather square footage information, hire a third-party verifier and figure out Energy Star Portfolio Manager, request their data. Everything's new, and so it's expected that the compliance rate would be lower for those smaller, newer buildings. I also want to note too that non-compliant parcels are more likely to contain many BERDO IDs within them, or many buildings within them. So a parcel could contain 20 different buildings within it, each of which has its own BERDO ID. So in that example, our compliance rate that we showed, those 20 small buildings have the same weight as 20 large buildings downtown, for example. So, it's important to note how many buildings are in compliance, but it is better weighted to look at the compliance by square footage. I also want to note that BHA, Boston Housing Authority, currently accounts for 10% of all BERDO buildings. And they just recently backed out of their recent data submission to fix a widespread data quality issue that was impacting their gas data. So it's important that they spend time to report it accurately so that they can plan for decarbonization with greater confidence. And they're looking to have this resolved as soon as possible. But that 10% of all buildings is having a pretty large impact on our overall numbers at the moment. So with that, I do want to kind of note our outreach efforts. So we are going to be, of course, sending non-compliance notices, both by mail and by email. There are a large number of properties that have not submitted their data that we have multiple contacts for as a result of them submitting in previous years. So our follow-up this year will be a lot smoother, and as more buildings submit in years moving forward, we'll have more comprehensive, more robust contact information to ensure that we're tracking down these buildings and making sure that they're in compliance each year. We are planning to work with city councilors and neighborhood liaisons to provide them each with a tailored list of non-compliant buildings that is specific to their district. We are looking to reach out to property management companies proactively and other real estate groups to identify properties within their portfolios that have already reported. Many property management companies receive notices from owners who have been mailed about BERDO, but may not be aware that other properties that they manage are also covered. So looking at all strategies to increase this rate of compliance, and that will be helped by the fact that we're going to get additional staff capacity. So within the next few weeks, we aim to hire 2 additional BERDO assistants, and that was going to help our capacity to focus more on proactive outreach as opposed to the reactive work. And that aligns well with us, getting past this reporting deadline as well. So there's a lot I just covered there, but that's it for me at this time. So pass it back over to you, Lee.
Great, thank you. Thank you for that, Aiden. So I think what we're gonna move to right now is this is a chance for the board and then the public to provide any questions or comments regarding this. And so I'm just gonna go ahead and go down the list. Although I do see your hand up, Board Member Lattimore, is there something you want to start us off with?
Oh, that's fine if you want to go down the list, but either way, if you want me to start, I do have a couple of questions.
Yeah, why don't you kick us off, and then I can go back to the list here.
Thank you. If you could go back to the graph, I have a couple of questions about the graph. So I want to make sure I understand the graph. As I understood, there were about 6,000 BERDO eligible buildings in the city, correct?
Yes, yep, that's correct.
And you said 46% have reported, which I assume that's why I'm just trying to make sure I understand the different categories on this graph. So the first category and how that relates to the overall number of buildings that are BERDO reporting eligible. So not submitted without extension means so this first graph is the number of buildings. So cumulatively, meaning the gray, the blue, the yellow represents different tranches in terms of time frame. And so I'm adding up all those, or is it still just 46% that all three of those colors represent the 46% that have reported? I just want to make sure I'm understanding the graph.
Yeah. So the different colors represents different time periods for since I last presented these numbers. So if you add up all of the yellow, it would add up to 100% of the buildings that are covered by BERDO. If you add up all the blue, it would be the same. Add up all the gray, it would be the same. So each of those bars next to each other is just showing how that number changes over time.
So I'm sorry, I'm still a bit confused. There are 6,000 BERDO reporting eligible buildings. These three bars are telling me that all 6,000 are reporting, or they're only 46% are reporting. I'm just still having something's not clicking for me here.
Sure. And I realize I think what we could do better on the next time we present this is to better put the actual percentages into this graph to more clearly display the rate of compliance. But yeah, so mentioned 46% of buildings have submitted their data. So
which means 54% have not.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
And then, so 54% still haven't submitted their data. And then in compliance, that last set of bars, in compliance means that there are a total of about 25, 27 or so hundred buildings that are in compliant out of that 6,000.
That's right.
Is that correct? Okay.
That's correct.
All right, got it. And so that's buildings as opposed to square footage, correct?
That's correct. Yep.
Okay, so 54% of buildings, 63% on a square footage basis are in compliance.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. And then you mentioned, and then how many total BERDO dedicated staff are there for this within the city?
Within the city, I would say,
including the two that are either just got or about to be hired. Just curious.
well, including the two, I believe there would be 7 to 8.
7 to 8. Okay.
That would include both the BERDO reporting and implementation team and the BERDO regulations development team.
Right. Okay. And how many are on the reporting and implementation side versus the development?
Yeah. So with these two new BERDO assistants, there would be 5.
5 on kind of the compliance and monitoring type side. Okay. Got it. Thank you. That's all I have. Thank you, Acting Chair.
Of course. Great. So let's just go down the rest of the list and see if anyone else has comments or questions. So I will go to you, Board Member Boyd.
Not at this moment. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Board Member Ellis.
Yes, thank you, Acting Chair Lee. First off, let me just say I'm glad to hear about the additional capacity that the city will have to, do the outreach and hopefully get some of these additional folks to report. If we could actually go back to that slide that we were just on for a moment, I'm curious about the increase associated with the not submitted without extension. I would expect that to go down, and I'm wondering if you can provide some clarity about that.
Yeah. So that at first confused me as well. But I remember that we had worked with Boston Housing Authority and with the state to create BERDO IDs to better align with their buildings. And so as a number of those are still not submitted at this time, that is my explanation for the increase. And I admit that's the extent that I really looked into that. But yeah, I believe that would be why the overall number of BERDO IDs not submitted would have increased. But yeah, I can't speak to it any further than that. And I think what I'd like to do on my side is to look into it a bit further, though, just to, because I would expect a decrease as well in that number. The number that we added to the covered buildings list would think be offset by the number that had reported over the last few months that were in that category. So if I can find a bit more context on it, I'll be sure to follow up and provide that.
Thank you. Two more questions. And speaking of BHA, Boston Housing Authority, excuse me, and what you spoke on, given the update that they need to do, I'm curious about the data disclosure. And so you stated that the data disclosure will be happening in October, and I'm wondering if the values associated with the buildings will be fixed or static for that time period, or if they manage to make their update in November, will the data disclosure on the map be updated to align with more recent information coming in?
Yeah, so the automated map will and disclosure data set will update with any newly submitted data. So we don't want to disclose any data that is not accurate. And we, much like our most recent disclosure, only disclose information that has been verified and submitted to the city. So we did not disclose any information that we maybe had access to because it was shared with us through Portfolio Manager, but the owner never hit submit. We still technically are able to see that information, but we don't want to disclose anything that has not been fully submitted. So that won't be an issue. And should BHA's timeline not align with our disclosure timeline, the automation of the data set and the map should allow for that data to populate once it's ready.
Got it. Thank you. My last question has to do with a request that I had made in the previous meeting about potentially being able to see the compliance based on primary building types. I'm just curious if the department is prepared to share that today, or is that something that we could see in the next meeting?
Yeah, so we are not prepared to share that today. I could at the very least share that in the next meeting, but hope to send along some sort of version of it beforehand. The reason why it's difficult for us to run compliance numbers for each building use type is that we don't know exactly what the building use type is going to be until it's been submitted to our team. So, we have through our assessing department, for example, we know which buildings are multifamily and we know which ones are commercial. But that's about the extent to which, we're really confident in those two categories if the data hasn't been reported. So if it's reported through Portfolio Manager, we know, for example, that a building is a medical office building. But our assessing department might just have that as a commercial space and not further specify what category that falls under. So the fact that we have so many buildings that have not yet submitted, we can't put a compliance rate to each specific building use type. But we should be able to, at the very least, provide a commercial versus multifamily look. And I can have that information at the very least by the next review board meeting. I'll try to put that together sooner.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I think I'll add, I think one of the reasons why I requested that is because it might help begin to show the nature of who's not reporting, as well as any potential future hardship that may be requested given the reporting behavior thus far. So I get that the assessing department is not giving that layer of detail needed to really specify which one, but I think anything high level is fine to start with, and then that can sort of be built out over time. So other than that, thank you for that feedback. I have no further questions at this time.
Great, thanks, Board Member Ellis. Board Member Jacobs.
I'm not sure if it was touched on, but how long is the normal extension? Is it 90 days?
So the extension, there were sort of, 2 rounds of extensions this year. The initial deadline is May 15th. We had we allowed for an extension for everyone who requested it to June 15th. So just 30 days. Then allowed for an additional 60 days beyond that to August 15th for anyone who could provide a reason as to why they were unable to submit by that June 15th deadline. So we don't have a sort of very standard extension time frame that we put out each year. I think 2021, first year BERDO 2.0, it was from June 15th to December 15th, so that threw a lot of people off, I think. Definitely understood the third-party verification, so everything took much longer. So yeah, overall for this year, it ended up being 90 days past May 15th. But I can't speak to whether or not we'll have an extension next year, and if so, what time frame that will be.
Okay, that was the only question.
Chair Matsueda, if I could jump in quickly there.
Yeah, please.
It noted correctly that, the beginning years, we had some special circumstances as new buildings came in. But the ordinance does provide that the review board can develop a procedure for establishing alternative reporting dates for building owners who supply timely notification of extenuating circumstances. So for in years going forward, that's an issue the review board could choose to address.
Appreciate that.
Right.
That was the only question that I had.
Thanks, Board Member Jacobs. I'm going to go ahead and just make a couple comments, and then Board Member Lattimore, we'll do one more round if you just have any other comments or questions. Yeah, I mean, definitely, I think we knew how hard this reporting and compliance piece was going to be, I guess, and definitely like Board Member Ellis, I'm actually very glad to hear that there's new staff that will be coming on. Are they full-time?
Yes.
They will be. Okay, great.
Yeah. We had two BERDO fellows, which were year-long positions, and those have been, converted into full-time BERDO assistant positions.
Great. And looking at that bar graph, it's clear there's still 2,000 buildings still not submitted without extension. I guess the related question I have is, are there additional needs that the staff has identified or that you've gathered building owners some needs that they might have in order to get us, better up to the right numbers here, or just have more compliance? Are there any other, things that you want to share with us that is helpful to understand about how we can get closer to getting more and more buildings there? I know it's just going to take time, and it's good to have the new staff, but are there other things that you would just share, or other needs that you have?
Well, yeah, I can, speak to it sort of generally. I think it does start with increased capacity and with many BERDO reporting deadlines, our staff can at times be in more of a reactive state. So we're pretty encouraged by the increase in our team size, and so I think we want to make sure that we're separating out the non-compliant properties by district, so that we can work with city councilors, neighborhood liaisons, and then work with different ownership groups, property management companies. And I think in terms of identifying groups that might know these buildings, and we will have a full list of these non-compliant properties, these addresses, parcel owner names that we'll be able to share out, and hope that folks that are more engaged with these communities will be able to recognize certain addresses, certain owner names, and say, oh, okay, I know that person, let me just reach out to them. And so I think we want to kind of maximize the number of people that we're going to that can have that reach themselves. And yeah, I think we're going to have to get pretty creative with how we take these approaches. But yeah, I guess beyond that, I'm not sure if anyone else from the BERDO team has specifics, but I don't have anything further on specifics on how the review board might be able to help in that capacity.
Okay. Yeah, obviously, yeah, I want to keep hearing if there are other needs that the staff has just to get there. And then, just on the whole list thing, I think there are probably other contacts or groups of folks that we could help identify that also might be helpful on a very neighborhood or district level. I'm trying to balance out and thinking through a little bit about how you use it as an opportunity to educate people, engage them, potentially get feedback, but also say, here's something that we need your help with. If you're doing a lot of community organizing, community work, you can't just drop it on a neighborhood association and be like, hey, we need you to help us identify these things. I think there needs to be something that you're also providing. So in any case, it's just a thought, and I'll think a little bit more about that, but I do think that there's expertise and knowledge through this review board and even through our community advisory group and others that could really be helpful in continuing to identify other potential folks in both how we present the information, how we present what's going on, but also asking for support. So just a thought there, Aiden.
Thank you.
Yeah. Board member Nelson.
I know you're still working on compliance rates by sector, but do you have any feel for what the rates are for some of the larger sectors such as healthcare and colleges and universities? Are the compliance rates much higher for those entities?
Yes. Yeah, they are. Of larger universities, hospitals within healthcare institutions within Boston. We work with each of them closely, and yeah, just through my experience on the BERDO reporting side, I can say yes to that with confidence. They're much higher than even the average. Then I would say the overall rate of compliance for commercial properties, for example.
So the hospitals as high as 100%?
I can't speak to that exactly. I know that at least the hospitals I've been working with, it's my understanding that they're all across the finish line for this year, but there might be other parcels out there or ownership entities that I just simply haven't worked with yet, and we haven't been able to kind of break down their categorization. So yeah, I can't say that they're at 100% hospitals, but I can say that the largest institutions that I've been working with personally within Boston have been reporting.
Thank you.
Great, thanks, Board Member Nelson. Board Member Palmer Dunning.
Great, thank you for providing this overview. In the next slide, on the context, yeah. So, for the non-compliant parcels that contain multiple buildings, are there any buildings within the parcels that are reporting, and others that aren't?
Not in my experience. I've typically it's all of them are reporting or none of them are reporting. You know, we have certain checks on our reporting process that you know, where we will you know, if an owner with 10 different buildings within their parcel is reporting everything as one building, our data quality checks will flag that, and we'll reach back to them and say, no, you know, you have to report each building individually. In certain cases, we're able to consolidate BERDO IDs in cases where owners are unable to report building by building. But at least in the cases that I've worked with, it's been an all or nothing. And there are you know, quite a few properties out there with a very large number of BERDO IDs that I think was worth noting in this, as they are, you know, disproportionately impacting that you know, compliance rate by building.
Great. And then my second question, so in terms of kind of next steps, working with city councilors and neighborhood liaisons, who are those neighborhood liaisons, and has there been any thought given to kind of cross-agency collaboration, say with like BPDA and like the community engagement managers there on doing additional outreach?
Yeah, so you know, I can't speak to exactly what our next planned steps are there. I know we're looking to kind of reach out on this as soon as possible, but I can say that we've reached out to neighborhood liaisons earlier this year to kind of give them an overview of BERDO and provide them each with a, you know, list of non-compliant buildings that they oversaw, but have not kind of followed up on that work with them. So we really need to kind of re-engage, and you know, they're aware of BERDO at this point, but I think it's up to us to, you know, make sure that they have their updated list of non-compliant buildings, and that they're you know, fully aware of how they need to reach out themselves to non-compliant buildings. I can't speak to the city councilors and exactly what our plan is going to be for that. I know that's our next step for us in terms of outreach. I just I don't have those finer details.
Great, thanks.
Okay, I do want to make sure we get to public comments and questions on this, but I will see if there's any one last round of just board member comments and questions, and then we can move to that. So I don't have to go through the whole list. Just if any of you have, as board members, have questions or comments, just raise your hand or start speaking up. Board Member Lattimore, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I'll try to keep this concise because I know we have a lot of other things. I want to get public comments, but just a couple of quick questions. So the original ordinance, I know we're doing the BERDO 2.0 or wherever we are, a piece of this, but the original ordinance that started in 2013-14, was there any way to identify building typologies then? Meaning, I know we are now trying to do kind of you know, building portfolio identification or naming. Was there any way to identify buildings then for owners to do that with the original?
Yeah. So as owners reported back in 2013, 2015, they still would have reported through Energy Star Portfolio Manager, which, you know, through which they need to select an exact building use type. And so we would have received the the building use types for each submission for each BERDO reporting year.
Mhm.
What we still wouldn't have had even back then was exactly which building use type under portfolio manager the buildings that didn't report would have selected had they reported.
Okay, I think I understand. And then just to the points in the discussion that has been had about, next steps, how to reach the folks that are not compliant. And what we're talking about compliance is just reporting compliance, separate from emissions compliance, correct?
Correct, yes.
Okay. And so one thought would be, thinking about the mass housing partnership. I don't know how helpful this would be, but just other agencies that give money out to small landlords, and I think they had a small landlord program at one point that they gave funding to folks probably in the BERDO oriented category. It might have been slightly smaller than BERDO, but just a thought about what other city as well as state programs are there that that have been working with the type of owners that are BERDO reporting required owners. So that's just a thought. And then I wondered about training. I would imagine that some of the non-compliance, curious about the question about who isn't reporting that the other board members have raised. But I would imagine that some of them are relatively, small landlords. I don't know. Maybe it's not the case. And what kind of training on reporting can be, it has been or could be offered up, because I think it could be intimidating for some. I know we have 1,000 units in our portfolio. We have a professional property management company. I know when we were doing the uploading the data, and I wasn't doing this, but the management company was, to WegoWise and other kind of reporting, energy reporting databases. It's not an easy thing to do, and it's a costly thing to do. So I wondered about training and on reporting. What can others learn from those who have experience in doing the reporting that are not reporting? It could be. So I'm just curious, have there been any? Is there any thought to, providing some type of training to, folks that haven't been reporting?
Yes, yes. So this was something that we had been, we had hosted a few webinars, throughout last year and into early this year. It's something that we will look into starting back up, especially now that we have more capacity on our team. So we've put together a few recordings of those webinars where in some cases we can kind of email those recordings out, but recognize that that isn't how a lot of people like to learn and interact. So we will aim to have a number of different types of trainings, whether it be how to request your aggregate utility data from Eversource, how to enter your data into Portfolio Manager, and eventually how to best prepare to meet your upcoming emission standards. So we've we'll aim to reintroduce that, in addition to potentially opening up BERDO office hours again, where anyone can join, schedule 10-15 minutes of a staff member's time and just talk through any ongoing questions that they might have. Of course, they can email or call us at any time, but having that time available is helpful as well. So
thank you. That's really good to hear. And just really quick, how many folks took advantage of that type of training? Was it well attended, or just curious about that?
Yeah, so I'd say I recall it being well attended. I don't recall exactly how many people.
It's good that it was well attended.
But there were, we did have a few different webinars throughout the year, and the office hours were very, very well attended.
Great, thank you.
Yep.
No more questions.
All right, thanks, Board Member Lattimore. Any other questions from members of the board? Comments? Okay, If not, we're gonna now open the meeting to public comment. So as a reminder to members of the public to provide public comment, please raise your hand or type in the chat in the application via the Zoom meeting platform. If you're calling in and you can't use that platform, you can raise your hand by pressing *9. You can also send your questions to the staff via email at BERDO reviewboard@boston.gov. As a reminder, we're gonna, I don't know if we're gonna actually need this, but limit questions and comments to 3 minutes to ensure everyone has a chance to speak. We'll also ask members of the public to introduce yourself, and if you can, share which neighborhood you are either living in or work in. So let's go ahead and do that. I already see one hand up, Weezy. Thanks again for joining us. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and share whatever questions or comments you might have.
Weezy Waldstein, Action for Equity. I have a clarification question, and I apologize if I should have understand this. Could you put that graph back up on the screen again? Am I reading it correctly? If what it looks like is there's approximately 2,000 buildings that have not been in compliance each year, that haven't submitted and haven't come in for an extension. Am I reading it properly? That's my first question.
Yeah, so Weezy, there are about 2,000 buildings that have this year that have not requested an extension and are not in compliance. They may have reported last year. They may have reported in previous years. They may be engaged in the BERDO process right now in some way, but just never requested an extension. But each of those bars is from this year. It's just looking at, the gray is from June, the blue is from July, and the yellow is from just last week, early September.
And thank you for that, because I had missed that those weren't different years. They were just different snapshots. Do you know, is there a way to check which of these have ever reported before? And how many are just completely not engaged in the BERDO process versus they're in there somewhere?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we do know of a pretty large number of buildings that have not yet submitted this year that have been engaged at some point within the last 2 years. Maybe they reported last year, maybe they've shared over their data through Portfolio Manager, but just haven't yet reported for either year. And so we do have we can pull together the engagement from the last 2 years. Beyond that, before what we call BERDO 2.0, we're dealing with a much smaller set of buildings, and they had to report data in a slightly different way. And in some cases, maybe they reported at the property level or the parcel level instead of building by building, if it was a property with multiple buildings. So it's a little bit different in how they reported. So if we did pull together those numbers, they might not be the cleanest. It might be a rough estimate, but it would be a good way to kind of get an understanding of who has at least engaged with BERDO in the past. What amount of buildings are just have never submitted to BERDO, have not engaged with us in any capacity. So we can look into pulling those numbers together in some way if we're able to do it in a way that makes sense. But I do think that would be a good idea.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Weezy. It's a great question. Other members of the public, any other comments or questions you all like to make? Please do. Welcome again to type in the chat, raise your hand, or just go ahead and speak up. Okay. Once, twice. All right. I think in that case, we are going to move on. I'm going slow here just to see if anybody else has any last. Okay. If not, we're going to move on to our third agenda item. Thanks again for the staff here and Ada in particular for just helping us understand that and walk through and answer questions, and for everyone else for your comments and questions. So we're gonna switch things up now to get some updates on regulation development on phase 3 of BERDO. So I'm gonna hand it over to staff again to help us out.
Hi, everyone.
Hannah?
I can kick us off. So again, reminder, we are in phase 3 of regulations development. So in the past, we've really focused on building portfolios and individual compliance schedules. Now for today, we'll be talking a little bit more about hardship compliance plans and the Equitable Emissions Investment Fund, and the working sessions that were held. But before that, I want to give a reminder, review of activities that have happened thus far. So we launched phase 3. We hold monthly community advisory group meetings. Our next sort of meeting with the community advisory group is at office hours scheduled for this week. We've had focus groups on hardship compliance plans. In August, on the 22nd and the 23rd, we held public working sessions on hardship compliance plans and the Equitable Emissions Investment Fund. The slide deck and notes are available for both of those sessions on the website at boston.gov/BERDO-regulations. And the city also has an upcoming community focus group on the Equitable Emissions Investment Fund. Sorry, I should have added the date on here. Later this month. And this will be a focus group really with residents, Boston residents, to kind of hear their thoughts around the fund. And then, of course, we're continuing to work with our technical consultant to support the development and regulations regarding technical hardship compliance plans. And just another reminder that we currently have kind of a comment period open until this Friday, September 15th at 12 p.m. So this would be the second comment period for building portfolios and individual compliance schedules, and the first sort of informal comment for hardship compliance plans and the Equitable Emissions Investment Fund. And the Air Pollution Control Commission is scheduled to have a special hearing on Wednesday, September 27th at 2:30. So that should give us enough time to read the comments and revise our proposals in response to the comments received. And now I will hand it off to Claudia.
Hi, everyone. I'm just gonna give you a very brief summary of what we reviewed and talked about on the past public technical working sessions on hardship compliance plans in the Equitable Emissions Investment Fund. Next slide, please. So our first technical working session was on hardship compliance plans on August 22nd. Again, more detailed summarized comments are available on the BERDO regulations website, but we just wanted to highlight the types of conversations that we had in this event. So in this session, participants shared examples of characteristics and circumstances that might lead to hardship for us to consider. They also suggested ways to demonstrate certain types of technical hardships, and participants also suggested forms of relief that might be provided through hardship compliance plans. Next slide, please. And our public working session on the Equitable Emissions Investment Fund was held the next date on August 23rd. And some of the key takeaways or points of discussions that we had were that we need more details on the evaluation criteria that the review board would use to evaluate projects to provide funding. We also discussed the importance of defining how to prioritize these different evaluation criteria. For example, are all criteria worth the same, or are there any that should be prioritized over others? And there were also suggestions that the City of Boston should consider how to track the impacts of funded projects, both in terms of emissions reductions and other types of benefits. So that's just very brief. If you're curious for more, you can go to the notes or we can discuss further today. Yeah, I think I'll kick it back to Diana. Yes.
Yeah, and so super quickly, just wanted to review next steps for regulations development. So once the comment period closes this Friday at 12, the BERDO team will read and summarize, the comments that we receive and prepare revisions to present to the Air Pollution Control Commission on September 27th. And for fines and enforcement, which is another item that we want to tackle for phase 3, the timeline is to be determined. And then of course our our handy visual for timelines. And I believe that's it. Yes.
All right, thank you so much, Diana and Claudia. Appreciate that. So we will now go back to the board and see if you all have any questions or comments about the regulations development for phase 3. I'm gonna go in reverse order this time. So board member Palmer Dunning, any questions or comments you'd like to share regarding the updates that were provided?
No comments at this time. Thanks.
Great. Board member Nelson.
No comments, Lee.
I was just going to offer, I mean, obviously, I really appreciate from the sort of summary of the different responses that the staff is making to the formal comments that have been submitted. I guess one question I have is more related to like how has the process with the community advisory group, how has those meetings been going, and is there just open invite in terms of participation to that group? Has there been consistent engagement? Just curious to hear. It feels like it's a very important group. I know a number, or at least one of the groups have been submitting comments directly, formally through the process, but just curious to get for the staff that have been working with the community advisory group, just any, more details from you all, a little bit about the community advisory group, how that's functioning, and again about increasing participation if that's a goal or something that seems helpful.
Sure, I can start with that, and Diana or Aladdin, feel free to add on to that. So the meetings with the community advisory group are held more or less once monthly, and then we have another monthly office hours. Depending on the topics, what we discuss might be the proposals that we had for a certain topic. We ask questions, hear reactions, see gut checks of what we're thinking about. We work with a consultant to facilitate those meetings, and generally there is meeting notes that are taken, and we have a feedback chart where we collect all of the feedback and comments that community advisory group members provide, sort of just to provide continuity of what we've been speaking about. And some of those members also send formal public comment letters to the APCC formal process, but there's also the opportunity, of course, to have feedback during those meetings without the need for a letter. These community advisory groups sort of evolved from a similar group that we had in phase 2 of the regulations development process. And we invited more groups to participate this year as well. So generally, it's organizations that are focused on environmental justice, climate action, social justice more broadly, workforce development, affordable housing. And yeah, they're not open to the public, but if there's any suggestions of community groups that we're missing and would be helpful, like we would love that feedback as well.
Thank you, Claudia. That's a great description. The only thing I'd add is that the agendas for the meetings do also include topics that members of the community advisory group raise. Again, either things that they've been thinking about or that they're reacting to the proposals so that we can bring them additional data and discussion on those points.
Great. Thanks, Eladine and Claudia. Can you share who the consultant is? It the same consultant we've been working with in the past?
You mean with the review board? So the name of the consultant is Collective Insight. It's a different consultant from the ordinance process, if that's where you were thinking about. And it's a different consultant from the technical consultant for hardship compliance plans as well. Yeah.
Okay, right. I remember working with I thought a different consultant at one point with the community advisory group. So that's helpful to know. All right, thank you. Let's go to board member Lattimore.
Thanks. Yeah, just to follow up on the community advisory group. I was also on it at one point, but because I'm on this review board, was advised by the Ethics Commission not to participate on the community advisory group. And however, I would say that my understanding is participation sitting in. I like to still try to sit in, not participate, but hear. And I would recommend other review board members, if they have the time or interest, do the same, because there's a lot of, contextual information, similar information that we're going over here, a lot of comments that obviously get presented here too, like just now. But I found it really helpful to hear what comes up at the community advisory groups. Even though I cannot participate, I don't think that means I cannot listen in. So I just recommend that to other review board members. I think it's helpful. I have a question about the last two phase 3 topical areas, fines, and I can't remember what the other one was. I can't remember if it was Diana or Claudia who said that the time frame for doing those last two fines and then compliance with emission standards. I think those are the last two topical areas, phase 3 regulations to get to, and that was to be determined. My understanding is by the end of the year, the goal is to complete all of these phase 3 regulation topics. And so that by the beginning of the year, we're able to, or at some point by the end of the year, or early in the beginning of the year, finalize all regulations and go into implementation. Is that correct? And so I just want to get a understanding of like the to be determined. I know is to be determined, but am I correct in the sense of final completion of all these regs by the end of the year?
I'll start there. Yes, the goal is to have everything done by the end of the year, but we are prioritizing the pieces that will allow building owners to start applying for building portfolios or think more about their compliance pathways. So that's just kind of reflected in the order in which we're addressing them. But yes, that is the ultimate goal.
Okay, so still some work to do. And the final question is, and so the fines and enforcement and compliance with emission standards have not been put to the CAG either at this point, or discussed with, gotten feedback, or have
no, we haven't introduced them as a formal topic. There had been, informally, sometimes people have mentioned fines and enforcement, but formally we have not started with them either.
Thank you. No more questions.
All right, thanks, board member Lattimore. Board member Jacobs.
No questions for me.
Okay. Board member Ellis.
Yes, thank you. I have two questions, and it's more so seeking clarification. Has any of the feedback from the working session been incorporated into the updated drafts, or I want to make sure that I'm paying attention to what I need to be paying attention to? So has any of those feedbacks been addressed so far?
So we haven't presented any revised draft language, but they will be once we present them to the APCC, which is on the next special hearing, September 27th.
Okay.
And I would just flag that does reflect the pattern from previous meetings on earlier topics. It's just with hardship and the Equitable Investment Fund, we're still in the revising to reflect input stage.
Got it. Okay, not a problem. And then the second question is, and this is just a general curiosity about how the city works. Does the city track impacts on funded projects? Because I know that was one of the sort of recommendations about the Equitable Emissions Investment Fund. And so I guess I'm curious, does the city do that at all and track their impacts and how those projects or how that funding is affecting the city as a whole? Is there any example that you can point me to?
So I think what you're asking is beyond BERDO, if in other
Yeah.
funding programs, yeah.
Yes.
I suspect yes, but let us follow up with that so I don't just answer off the cuff on
Okay.
that.
Not a problem. I'm just curious
Yeah.
how that looks and how sort of the public digests that. So that's all
Yeah.
for me. Thank you.
Thanks, Board Member Ellis. And Board Member Boyd.
No, I'm all set. Thank you.
Okay. You know, I know there's not a slide for this, but I will just offer that if there are members of the public that just had any comments or questions on this, I'd want to open it up to that. So I'll do that in just a moment, but any other members of the board just have any additional questions or comments before I do that? Okay. So I'll just do that quickly. I will open this part of the agenda open to public comment. I'll read through the whole thing again. As a reminder, to provide public comment, you can raise your hand, type in the chat via the Zoom meeting platform if you're calling in and you can't use the platform, you raise your hand by pressing *9, or you can send questions to staff at BERDO Review Board at boston.gov. Any questions from members of the public or comments? Okay. Well, if not, we can move on to our final agenda item. We have a fairly light agenda here. So for the fourth agenda item, we're going to cover some administrative updates. So I'm going to pass it to you, Diana.
Yeah. So I just want to remind board members that for September, we agreed to meet once, given Labor Day. So last Monday was Labor Day, and we moved the meeting to today. So this will be our only meeting for September, and our next tentative scheduled meeting is October 2nd. I also wanted to mention we're continuing to work on finalizing working groups. So we will have a working group on healthcare systems connected to district energy systems, and a working group on commercial real estate that will kind of assist the review board. We plan to schedule their first meeting as a group within the month, and we're working on finalizing the membership of the groups. So if anyone has any names that come to mind that you think would really fit on these sort of groups, please feel free to email me either at my personal email and I can send that in the chat, or the BERDO Review Board email, as we try to work to finalize these working groups. We'd really appreciate that. But yeah, those are the two admin updates on my end.
Great, thanks, Nana. Yeah, so just for the board, I guess just to quickly check in, are you all good with that? I feel like there is a bunch to do, but we sort of agreed on this pacing for the month of September. So just wanted to check in, make sure you all are good with that. Again, if you haven't already, just make sure you respond to the calendar and make sure you can make that meeting on the 2nd. Is everyone good with that? All right.
I know that I'm out of town on the 2nd, but I believe as long as I'm not in the air, I might be able to make it.
Okay.
Just gotta double check my calendar, but.
All right, sounds good.
And Lee, if I could jump in, this is Jack.
Please.
Diana, this working group for hospitals hooked up to central energy plants, does that include vicinity connections?
Correct. Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I'll definitely have a group of names for you.
Sounds good. Thank you.
I'll send you an email directly.
Yes, that works.
Okay.
Great.
And that's not scheduled, Diana? That working group?
Not yet. We're hoping to get names. So we're hoping to finalize the membership and then coordinate schedules.
Okay. Thanks.
Great. All right, so board members will be on for our meeting on the 2nd. I know there are other obviously hearings coming up. The special hearing again, right, September 27th of the APCC. So that's another important date, and then obviously these working group sessions as well. And then I appreciate your suggestion, Gail, about maybe listening in. That is okay, right? If board members want to listen into the community advisory group meeting, is that correct?
I think we'll have to explore that idea because part of the setup is to have a private discussion with community advisory
Sure.
groups. And so we'd need to check the kind of ground rules and expectations that were laid out for participants.
So we should hold off on that until.
I definitely don't want to gate crash, so let me know.
Yeah, we can follow up on that.
I have been popping in occasionally.
I think we would just want to
Complaints
make sure
so
we
far.
check with them first.
I can appreciate that.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Completely.
Thank you.
If I can ask the question, Aladdin, if you don't mind, or maybe this is a question to Diana, if you don't mind sending that sort of decision or what you find out to the board across all of us, because I, just like board member Lattimore, I also am sort of peeking my head in just to get a sense of what the community is talking about, but I don't want my head to get chopped off because it ain't supposed to be there. So I'll just put that out there.
We'll make sure to let everybody know.
Great.
I would also suggest that board members consider, I don't think the office hours are controlled at all. I've participated in a couple of those, which have been also very informative and helpful. But Paladin and staff, let me know if that's an issue. But yeah.
We will address both for you.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you to obviously members of the board, to the public who joined us today, and to our fantastic staff. And our team looks like it'll be growing soon, so that's great to hear. I think we are on to meeting adjournment. So is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Great. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay. All right. So the ayes have it. The motion passes, and our meeting is adjourned early today at 5:45 p.m. Thanks, everyone. Have a
Thanks.
great evening.
Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.